do not know anything for sure. This show is not financial advice. Please do proceed with caution, exercise your own judgment, do your own research, but don't stop buying NFTs because that's why we're here. And the market is looking good. It's looking good. It's looking enjoyable. And we're going to get into all of that and more. But just a reminder, friends. I've done the reminder already. We've done both reminders. You know who we are. You know what the disclaimers are. Legendary, with that out of the way, it's Tuesday, the 20th of February. How are you doing on this day?
GM. I was thinking that it might be me getting sicker and sicker by the day that you're going for the reminder, the non-financial advice reminder twice, but it wasn't me. So I'm glad that at least I'm still able to follow the conversation. No, all jokes aside, I'm excited for Paris. I definitely will use the 2 days before I fly out on Thursday to rest up a bit. But unfortunately, we have quite some things coming up. We have the Starknet airdrop. We have the wormhole criteria being disclosed this week. We have Persona minting on the 22nd. So quite a lot happening this week. And luckily, most of these things can be done out of bed. And this is exactly where I will be headed after the show.
That's quite funny. It's funny, like in order to keep on top of all these things, I do think it's important to write things down. And I do know for sure that there are certain friends of ours who make notes like during the show sometimes to make sure that they stay on top of things. One of the things that I have been doing recently is not writing certain things down because I know that the timeline is going to remind me. So you mentioned wormhole to me just ahead of the show, and I said like, oh, I don't need to write that one down because of the partnership with D Gods, and I know like that one's going to take over the timeline when the time is ready. However, a good example of one that might kind of slip through the net is, remember we reported on the alt layer airdrop, which was for Celestia stakers and maybe some other Ethereum users too. So I had a bunch of claims for that, but then they said, oh, the alt layer, I can't remember who it was now. There's a bunch of people, but then like the Celestia stakers claim was today, like 2 weeks or 1 week later, 10 days later from the original claim. And I thought I better write that one down because that's one that could slip through the gap. Um, because I don't know if anyone like, because when something is the main event, it's like, okay, the majority of people are claiming today. That's when all the attention goes there. But then if something's going to be 2 weeks later and there's going to be a smaller proportion of people, maybe they're not keeping on top of it. Although I'm sure lots of people are staking Celestia in the audience because we've spoken about it so much, and so it's definitely worth going to check now. So I guess we're being the reminder in that respect, but clear distinction between opportunities on like certain ones where I'm like, right, I've got to take full responsibility for it, and some where it's like, oh, okay, someone's probably going to remind me about that in future. Do you have any view on that, Legendary?
That is the smart thing to do, sharing a personal story on that, on Degen way of things. I had a sizable amount of whitelist spots for a specific project that I completely had forgotten about. They reached out to me a couple days ago and were like, hey, do you want to join our mint party? I'm like, why would I join your mint party? Oh shit, I had whitelists for that project. Then I saw the message obviously after the mint party, so I even had missed that. So then I immediately went to check the floor and was like, hey, it's sitting on the floor. I didn't miss out on anything. So sometimes you just have to be lucky with those things if you're not a structured, insane person like you, taking notes and actually keeping an overview of the things they are doing and are being involved in.
Yeah, sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. And I think also maybe you can't necessarily beat yourself up for some of the things that you do miss out on. However, I will go on a little bit of a tangent to explain a little bit of a scare that I had to the audience yesterday. Just because I think it would be interesting for people to learn from. It didn't end up being a mistake, but it was a little bit of a tricky situation I found myself in. Hope it's valuable to people because, and maybe that you just a reminder to not do the same thing or just to be cautious. So for a little bit of time, and we're going to get into all the headlines in a moment, but just for a moment, for a little bit of time, I've had it on my list to like, look, we're going into a bull market. I need to just do like a once over security check. Like, check all the passwords, make sure they're all written down in the right place, make sure, the Discord's secure, make sure the passwords are secure, make sure the wallet's all secure. There's no point going through the whole bull market and then halfway through you like literally just lose access to something, or you get hacked. Or I mean, hacking is one thing, but losing access to something because you haven't got the seed phrase written where you thought it was, because you set that wallet up 2 years ago, that is like not okay. And that is one of the type of things I went through yesterday where, interestingly, I was trying to set up some transactions in my Magic Eden wallet weren't working, and I was speaking to the Magic Eden team about why I couldn't convert USDC. It's very niche, USDC on Solana, why I couldn't convert it to buy Bitcoin. That's just one of the transactions I wanted to make yesterday, and it just wasn't working over and over again in the wallet. So they basically started suggesting to me, like, just little things I could play around with, like, oh, have you just restarted your computer? Have you refreshed the browser? Have you closed the browser? Have you started it again? Then it started to get a little bit more technical. I was like, okay, if you go into the manage the extensions section and you switch developer mode on, like, will you try it in incognito mode? And like, it just started getting a little bit more technical, which is not good for me really, but I felt like I had understood it. I feel like I'd even done this before at some point. So it kind of was okay. But the problem was, and this is just like, just hopefully a warning to people when sometimes things happen that you just do not expect. I then I thought I did everything that I was asked to do. And then I just again tried to restart the computer. And when I restarted it, my whole profile, like my whole profile from which I normally enter stuff and all its extensions was gone. Like, all of the other ones, I had multiple, people have multiple profiles in their browsers. They were all there, but my main one was all gone. And I was like, okay, that's not good. However, if you have your seed phrase, that should be completely fine. So I went to get my seed phrase and I wanted to test it first on a wallet that I didn't care about. And the thing that got me really worried was that I tried a seed phrase, and I can laugh about it now, but it wasn't funny at the time. I tried a seed phrase which basically generated not the wallet that I expected it to generate. In fact, the wallet was empty when it should have had something in it. That got me really worried because I was like, okay, well, now I'm about to try with the wallet that I expect to have a lot more in it. What if that also doesn't work? Um, and then I spoke to Legendary. I spoke to some other friends who I trusted quite a lot, and they're like, no, it should just work. Something like it should play out just fine. But then, so I did it in the end. It turned, and I was in the meantime, I was like, okay, let me try with my Bitcoin wallet. Let me try with my Solana wallet. And those ones were all coming back okay. So that was kind of getting me along and making me think it was going to be okay. And then I did the main wallet, and that was also okay. And then what I realized was that the wallet that I had thought was my old wallet, which I didn't care about on ETH, I'd actually put in a Solana seed phrase. And that's why it didn't come up with anything at the time. And that's exactly the kind of thing that I wanted to that was what was on my list beforehand. It was like, get on top of the passwords, make sure everything is clear cut, that you know where things are, that you know what works. Because had I not had the seed phrase, or for whatever reason it wasn't readable or didn't have access to it or was incorrect, like, I'm pretty sure I would not be able to access the majority of the funds which I use in crypto, which would be a complete disaster. So a couple of learnings for me, and Ledry would want to hear your reflections on this. I know you've been through some interesting security things as well. An interesting learning for me, or key learning for me, is number one, it's not what I mean, this is for me personally, as a person that is not technical, it's not worth me messing around in the extensions tab for like for the sake of one transaction that's not working in a wallet. Like, I'm just going to tell them it's not working and they can fix it in their own time. I'm not going to go and mess around in the extensions tab personally. I know you could, it should be fine because it ends up being fine when you do a seed phrasing, but like, that's just one learning for me. I'm not a technical person. I'm not messing around with the technical stuff of it. The second learning is just make sure that you have the seed phrase exact, wherever you need it to be, and however many copies you need to have, make sure it is exactly as you need it to be and you have identified them properly and that you know which ones are for what. Because one of the things that's happened in this bull market is that we are proliferating wallets, we're proliferating accounts. I would be almost certain that people are going to start losing accounts at some point in time. Got to get on top of that and just be a bit more organized from that perspective. So I hope that's kind of interesting to share, because showing that it kind of, well, anyone can get worried about something at some point in time, even if you've tried your best to try to be on top of everything. And it's just a reminder to make sure that everything is okay. That was a little scare for me. Hope that was useful or interesting to share, with some key learnings. Legendary, what are your thoughts? What are your reflections?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also a good reminder to like make sure that you have your seed phrases properly stored, that you know what you can do and what you can't do technically, that you have like those fundamentals checked. But I think to me, one of the biggest things was always when it comes to storing the seed phrase to not have like a single like point of failure.
Mm.
Even with my seed phrase, I have it stored in a safe with 4-factor authentication. Actually, it is on a metal sheet that's protected in a contraption that actually would survive a plane crash. So like if
Ooh.
I'm carrying that, the black box and my seed phrase would survive the plane crash. I would die, but someone would be lucky. Um, but even that, I think that might be a bit extreme, but that thing that I've been thinking about and that I have been executing is like the Shamir style backup of seed phrases. So basically take a say 24 word seed phrase and split it up in 3 parts in a way that you create a redundancy that if you lose one of those 3 like sheets, any 2 combinations, whether it's part 1, part 2, part 1, part 3, or part 2, part 3, are enough to restore the full seed phrase, is good and is very, very helpful. And I think we very often think about like security, hardware wallets, etc. And I know a lot of people who set up like multiple ledgers with multiple sets of seed phrases, but then like kind of stop thinking about like how to secure the seed phrase.
Yeah.
Like just have a friend of mine in London and their flat burnt down and they had the seed phrase there. Like it was a non-issue to them from the crypto perspective because they had their wallets still working on their MacBook. The MacBook wasn't in the flat, so they were able to export the private keys, and like store the seed phrases in a more appropriate location. And even though this is an extreme case, if you have a majority of your assets in one single space, you basically want to do everything that you can to make sure that there's not even an unlikely situation like that, that can just simply like wipe you out financially completely. So one thing is wallet security. The other thing I'd say, and obviously you didn't face an issue when it came to wallet security, but it's just me extending that line of thought. The other thing is like seed first storage. Like it's such a basic, because especially if you experiment with a new chain, you set up your Cosmos stuff, you write down the 12-word seed phrase, the 24-word seed phrase, you think, nah, fuck it, it's just 2K, $200, whatever the amount is they send over there to play around with. And then you send more, you accumulate, and then you just lose that sheet and you realize the next bear market or at the top of the bull market, whenever you want to sell, that you just don't have access to that wallet anymore.
Mm.
I am still struggling to get access to one wallet that has ETH in there that I bought at $11. That was pre MetaMask. I am on a good way to getting access to it. It's basically it's a password that I need to crack to access the private key, and I know it's a mix of 3 passwords that I used back then at the time that I somehow combined, and I have a Python script running that basically that I didn't write myself that just tries to brute force the thing and it's still running. So basically I know we'll have access to it at some point, but it is just something that has been done sloppy. I didn't pay attention to it. I didn't think it could be something of value, so I lost access to it. And I think, especially in this bull market, where we will explore many more wallets, you will explore stuff like, I don't know, look at the Nibiru campaign that's going on right now. You need your own Nibiru wallet for that.
Yeah.
You have many things that will have their own wallets, and if you just lose access to them, and then 1 year down the line there's an airdrop for that and you can't claim that might be super valuable. That can be really annoying. So it's definitely worth to take the time and to just check that you have all your seed phrases in place.
For sure. I've actually lost access to one wallet, which I was using in 2021, like during the bull, because I'd moved everything over to a different wallet when I thought that one, for whatever reason, I just wanted to move over, and I've lost access to that one now. And it's annoying because you don't think it at the time, which is exactly the point that you're making. You don't think it at the time. You think, oh, it's just a small amount of activity. It's just this or that. But later on, this on-chain transaction history that we're building up is obviously very, very valuable when you move into a period of time where people want to try to reward on-chain activity. So very, 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 very interesting stuff. I hope that is very just illuminating. Hopefully that's a reminder to people to just be on top of your situation. It's so difficult right now because so much stuff is going on, but just to carve out like a little bit of time, because the worst case scenario possible is you go off and make really meaningful gains to you in the next 6 to 12 to 18, 24 months. And then something happens because of some oversight from yourself in the next few months. Let's go to Ukadal. I believe Ukadal is with Asset Dash. I think you've been with us before, Ukadal. Lovely to have you with us. It would be great to hear some of your reflections on this kind of starting conversation that we started with, and then we're just going to get into the headlines and get into the normal show in just a moment. Welcome to the stage, my friend.
Absolutely. Thank you, Modern. I want to cover about the purchasing Bitcoin on Phantom. I recently had an amazing experience using Simple Swap. So basically, yeah, and I was thinking like I see Bitcoin as like putting your money into it and forget about it because it's a super highly valuable asset, right? So,
Sure.
so yeah, the way is that let's say you have some gains, you want to throw it into Bitcoin, you will go to Simple Swap. And it's by the way, it's super easy with extension on Chrome or even on the phone. I tested on the phone recently. Basically, you connect to Simple Swap, you send some Solana. In return, you will ask for the equivalent of Bitcoin, and you gotta go to setting in your Phantom and enable Bitcoin integration.
Sure.
So you will get the Bitcoin in native SegWit, and let's say you send one Solana and you receive, for example, $100 worth of Bitcoin in super cheap fees. And when you want to send, for example, I tested what if I want to send this Bitcoin to an exchange, and the fees was like $50, and I was like, hell yeah, I'm gonna do that in the near future and exchange, for example, some assets into Bitcoin using Simple Swap.
Nice.
And
that's cool.
Yeah, and it took like it take your let's say 5 minutes of your time.
Sure. That sounds cool, man. Thanks so much for sharing. Appreciate it. I think one of the things that's interesting at the moment is that when you're trying to do these cross-chain things, I was definitely on the lookout for alternative options because I didn't want to go into a centralized exchange all the time. Not for any particular reason. I just thought it'd be easier and quicker to do it somewhere else. And someone told me that you can do it natively. In fact, shout out to English, who's Bitcoin expert and is in the audience with us. He told me you can just do it natively in the Magic Eden wallet. And it did actually work for me one time and then just stopped working for me this time. So definitely on the lookout for ways to kind of make these cross-chain purchases. Thanks so much for sharing there, Ukadal. Let's get into the rest of the show, guys. We've got all kinds of stuff to talk about and some interesting reflections to make. As always, we'll get into the headlines first, and we will do that on screen, sharing the screen. This comes from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. If you do find it brings you some value today, please do give it a like. Let's start with the price action first. We've got Bitcoin down 1% at 51.7K, ETH down 1% at 2.9K, Solana down a few percent at $109, Ape up 5% at 1.8. In terms of the headlines, we've got Persona Journey NFT revealing their whitelist sale price of 0.069 ETH and a public sale of 0.069 to 0.29 ETH. Going to dive into some of those whitelist, the mint mechanics in just a little bit. This is probably the most anticipated mint on ETH that there's been for a little bit of time. Number 2, 10 Autoglyphs sell for 5,000 ETH. That's $14.5 million broken by Fountain XYZ in the highest on-chain NFT transaction ever. Some context provided by Cyrus is that this is one of the greatest NFT trades of all time. 10 Autoglyphs, which were bought for 1.4 million in February 2021, just sold for 14.5. So a clean 10x for the buyer. Pretty outrageously good trade for them. And finally, Athena raises $14 million from top investors on crypto Twitter to create delta neutral synthetic dollar. This is fairly complicated, but it's backed by a hell of a lot of prominent people on the timeline, as well as established backers too. We're going to give a go of giving like a high level summary a little bit later on the show to make you aware of what it is and also one of the opportunities related to that. Getting into some price action on terms of NFTs, CryptoPunks at 56 ETH, Bored Apes at 21.7, Mutants at 3.9, DGods at 2.8, Captains at 4.7, Azuki at 6.3, Penguins up a couple of percent at 20.6, Mad Lads holding strong above 200 at 207. The Nouns winning bid was at 6 ETH. Got some top sales there in various collections. CryptoPunk selling for 70, Doodles still flying high, Dino trait selling for 20 ETH, and a Bored Ape Cheetah selling for 29.9. That's $87,000. Legendary, before we get into the headlines, are there any numbers here attracting your attention?
I like the Doodle Dino. Doodle Dino is one of my favorites on a personal note. I also like that ever since we started the show, ETH is on a nice upwards movement. That's
Is it?
295. So it's been climbing. Maybe it's one of those shows again where it could touch on 3K while we're doing the show. I would quite like to see that. I definitely have a couple of thoughts on the Autoglyph news as well once we get into it, though.
Okay, let's get to that in just a little bit. Before we go there, you touched on ETH price action. One of the questions I wanted to bring up before we attack the main stuff is this idea of moving along too quickly from your trades. ETH is obviously on the move right now. Before, Bitcoin was on the move, and anytime something is not on the move and something else is on the move, everyone really, really likes to dunk on the thing that is not on the move. That's definitely something that happens in our space. And I wanted to share some thinking from Suzu, who obviously was not someone the most held in highly regard most recently because of the way 3AC blew up. However, someone made the point that said everyone was clowning on Su for blowing up in 2022. No one is studying the run up from 2019 to 2021. And I actually thought, you know what? Like, whilst I completely accept that people, they very, very much mishandled risk and took too many big swings and kind of put their own investments in jeopardy, I do think there's space to say, right, they did X, Y, and Z really bad in this period of time. But in this period of time, they did X, Y, and Z really, really good. And so let's try to think about that and see what you can learn from both perspectives, right? They did some things wrong. They did some things well. Why not be able to learn from both? Because at one point in time, they were the gold standard fund. Now, obviously, that was because they were taking some outrageous risk, but maybe there were some things to learn from them. The idea that Sue shared here was some quick thoughts on stuff you buy, on like just how to hold on to things that you're winners, how to think about risk. And I wondered what your thoughts were on this, Legendary. Number one, stuff you buy pre-seed, whether that's pre-seed, seed, or deep venture, do not flip for a few X. If you're right, you're up 100X. The yield alone will recoup the principal. Don't use this to trade. Number two, combine farming with trading. Optimize a 3D portfolio. Get edge on market beta. Understand that people are structurally extremely lazy. Even as people rag on Atom last cycle, few realize that it was still a 100X if you got all of the airdrops. Put in the work and you'll be fine. Don't outsource thinking to too many types of people. Find your own style while openly exploring. Most of the alpha is in going against the current at key pivots. Nobody was doing grayscale ARBs in 2019. All the smart money called it a dead trade. We did ETH and sold 100K ETH for 300% premium. It's important to be early and high conviction. Early plus low or late plus high is still gross, to be honest. Legendary, do you have any reflections on this kind of thinking on how to participate at different points in the cycle and how to manage your allocation?
I think there's a lot of merit to that. I think if you look at a period like end of last year, say October to December, when Timeline was arguing, are we in a bull market? Are we in a bear market? It was looking, at least at the stock market, pretty fucking obvious that we are heading into a bull market with stocks very close to all-time high. But we were coming out of a bear market, that was for sure. And if you looked at valuations that companies came up with, those were bear market valuations, bear market terms. And there were definitely some opportunities to be had to jump into projects, into seed rounds at those bear market valuations. And they already did their 10, 20, 30 X's from that point on. Now, the question really is, if you've taken that 30X and you could already basically book it, do you accept that, or do you believe that your bet is right and go for the 100X, which from the 30X is quote unquote only another like 3.3X to go? Or do you book that profit? I think this is a bit more complex. I also think that Suzu was not referring to that specifically, but more like you get into a seed round, you do your 2X, 3X at TGE, and you're out. I think that is depending a lot on again, as we discussed yesterday, where you are on your journey. Now, the argument would be if you've already made a lot of money, right, then you don't need to chase a 100X. But then the argument also is if you've made a lot of money, you probably won't chase pre-seed rounds for 2X or 3X with small tickets either, because that wouldn't fit your investment style either. If we had NFT stats with us yesterday, and he said he's super happy with giving out loans on Blend and doing Blast and going for 20-30% APY, and he didn't chase to get into Portal Coin. And I think that matches the investment portfolio of a lot of people who've just been around in the space for a while and had the chance to accumulate some wealth by being here. Obviously, doing that before they entered Web3 doesn't really matter. So I think if you're in a position where like really chasing those early seed investments with smaller tickets, because you can't do a 50K ticket, right? You throw around 2-3K tickets, whatever it is, then there might be merit to that, to at least try to catch 1, 20, 30, 40, 50 to 100X with that. And if you take, and last point on that, it's always, it's not black and white, right? You can do things between not taking any profits and taking 100% profits. You can have a strategy in place that allows you to hold a moon bag while trading some profits. But I think if you've made a good play and the only reason that you're selling it is to chase something else, made a good investment, and now you want to sell out of it because you want to chase, I don't know, say, or whatever the blockchain that you might be looking at, but fundamentally you still believe that the Mad Lab that you've bought, for example, is a good thing to do, to hold, but you just sell it to chase something else, that might not be the best thing ever. On the opposite side, however, what we tend to do it's part of human nature is to, you know, not only sell winners too early, but like keep losers too long. Like you have something. I'm the best example with my 8 bag. I've watched that shit go down all the way. And like I should have sold that because the opportunity cost of not throwing that into parcel, like not taking out that substantial amount and throwing it into basically any airdrop farming opportunity, parcel, blast, whatever there's out there, would just have been a smarter thing than watching it go down dollar by dollar and be like, I might come back if Yuga does something cool. Yes, they might do something cool. But if I see that in the meantime, there are like 10 opportunities that are better to just use the money, that's not chasing another opportunity. It's just like reassessing your portfolio and like cutting your loss and accepting like the defeat of making a bad investment.
That's a good point that you were kind of concluded with. It's the idea of reassessing at different times. One of the key things on my list to do, hopefully I'll actually do this one, not like the wallet one, which I delayed too much. One of the key things on my list to do, and sometimes I'll do things like this where I'll write down on my list, not like I'll write down things that I need to think about. Maybe that's completely crazy to people. I know I'm a bit over the top when it comes to making lists for things, but it's like the reason why that's on my to-do list is because I know I need to do it. Like it's not something that I think about flippantly. It's not like, oh, I've got some ETH here. Maybe I'll just sell it and like just throw it into something else. Like I don't do it like that. I've written down on my list that I need to reevaluate my allocation to Blast, which is relative to the rest of my ETH. Two things. One, in the Blur ecosystem already, because I do a lot of lending. So that's like in the Blur ecosystem. Then I've got some Blur staking. Then I've got some that's already bridged over to Blast. So that's like one evaluation, like how much do I want in Blast versus in Blur versus Blur token staking. So that's like one evaluation. And then it's like, okay, well, how much do I want ETH in the Blur, Blast, Blend ecosystem versus how much ETH I have in general. So that's like one of the things that's on my list to do. And it takes a bit of time to think about that stuff. That's why I've literally written it down. So I like that idea of coming back to things and just re-evaluating every now and again to make sure that you are allocated in a way that is comfortable for you. We have gone over. We're talking a lot on various things today. We want to get into the headlines in just a second. Just want to give Funky an opportunity to come in here. Funky, welcome to the stage, my friend. As a seasoned investor, trader, participant in the space, what are your reflections on some of this conversation, either about security or just kind of thinking about your allocations and reevaluating as time goes on?
GMB check. If you didn't see it, Legendary dropped down to listener. He lost his connection, so you might have to bring him back up. But I just wanted to say this has been a great conversation. I think it really speaks to a theme that we've been addressing for many weeks at this point, with regard to just information asymmetry, being early, having that high conviction. You guys have covered a lot of ground. The one thing I was actually wondering, and I was just going to throw this out there for more discussion, but maybe we don't have time for it, was look at how ETH. Going back to earlier, where you guys were talking about when people were dunking on it for it not moving. And the market's kind of stalled out a little bit, except for ETH, and it continues to pump. And so what I've been wondering is, are we starting to see sort of that institutional front running? I got to imagine much of the Bitcoin price action across the last 3 to 5 months has been, gearing up for the ETF. And with some of the, now I think it was Fidelity or Franklin Templeton, some of them already signaling that they're applying for an Ethereum ETF. Are we already starting to see the big bags moving in and trying to allocate and get into positions, knowing that this is going to be the next rocket ship up? So just want to throw that out there for the conversation if we have a couple minutes to touch on that.
Interesting. Want to hear Legendary's thoughts on that. My quick take on it before we get into the headlines is I do not think institutions will try to front run it. I don't think that's what happened necessarily with the Bitcoin news. I think the inflows that we've seen post ETF is significant enough to suggest that there was just all of this capital that was ready and waiting to come in either on the day or just in the days after. I do think that there's a significant amount of like speculative capital that want to try to front run it in the same way that they tried to front run the Bitcoin ETF and then proceeded to sell it off on the news. So I do think that people, retail / more sophisticated crypto people, might be trying to run it up in advance, and then maybe we could see a similar sell-off again, not because it's a bad thing, but because there's speculative money going in it now. Before then, it can then get absorbed by proper buyers. That's my initial thought. I don't know if that's right or wrong. That's just how I'm thinking about it at the moment. Legendary, what are your thoughts before we get into this Autoglyphs news?
I think we've kind of seen it once the BTC ETF got approved, and we've seen ETH being actually the biggest mover on that day. People, as you said, speculative capital trying to chase the next ETF that ought to be approved. So I don't think that it's necessarily institutional money coming in and trying to front run that. I do think speculative capital is doing that and has been doing that for a while. I don't think that among that I do think that among that speculative capital, there might be a couple wealth managers, family offices that are more like, in tune with crypto, or other sources of capital that we might describe as institutional, who are already buying that up. But I don't think that this is a large movement that's happening at scale yet, because I think that the BTC ETF did show that institutional money and mass retail money just loves the simplicity of buying an ETF and not having to deal with any of the shit that we are doing in Web3.
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. So that's our take on that. Let's get into the headline news. Finally, we want to touch briefly on each of them, ideally, starting with the key headline. Legendary: 5,000 ETH in one sale for these autoglyphs. I'm going to share the screen on Autoglyphs so people can see what they look like. If they're not familiar with them already, I'm just going to go to the OpenSea site so people can see nicely. If people don't know, these are the NFTs created by Lava Labs. In their description, it says Autoglyphs are the first on-chain generative art on the Ethereum blockchain, a completely self-contained mechanism for the creation and ownership of an artwork. For some further context, as I mentioned, they're created by Lava Labs, the same creators of CryptoPunks. And the most recent price action, so you've got a few listed here for the people who can't see. You've got one listed at 230 ETH, one listed at 250, one listed at 255, and then there are no other listings on OpenSea. I don't know if they're on sale somewhere else as well. And then previous sales have taken place in the 100 to 170, 190 ETH region. So 2 months ago, there was a sale at 175 ETH. That was $515,000. 2 months ago, again, 115 ETH. That's 336. I think that was the really crazy trade where someone dumped their autoglyphs to like buy pudgy penguins or something. Do you remember that, Legendary?
Yeah, we talked about that on the show.
Yeah. I think that person must have crushed it, right? If it was definitely penguins that they put it into 2 months ago, just imagine, Lord above. Okay. But yeah, the typical sales were a little bit higher than that then. So 150, 158. So a very, very well established collection, one that is already considered to be one of the best around. There's only 512 of them. Legendary, any thoughts on this buyer? I know it was brokered by one particular, just got the name of the company who brokered it. It's called Fountain XYZ. I think they pride themselves on bringing more traditional collectors into this type of market. Apparently, the person who bought it wants to take them and put them in museums, and clearly didn't care about the price, because I guess they've paid about 500 ETH on average for each of them, which is more than 2x the floor potentially on OpenSea. So, what do you think about all of that?
I didn't check on that specifically, but my assumption would be that it might be a full set. This is why it was traded at a premium, because there's not a lot of people who have a full set. I think Danny Seedphrase has one, and there's definitely rarer ones that we don't see moving that often. So if it were a full set, that price would make sense. I also remember, by the way, talking about autoglyphs and the price action, the time when Nate Alex sold 10 autoglyphs for 20 ETH. So they have come quite a long way, similarly as Punks did. But I quite like the aspect of, you know, buying them and putting them in a museum, but also a completely different thought, just as a, you know, continuation of the conversation that we had before in terms of like holding the 100x, holding the 10x, or writing something off and going to another bag. Like the price action autoglyphs over the bear market didn't look all too attractive, but clearly the person who has done the 10x has had a lot of conviction in that. A, and B, my assumption would also be that it wasn't the majority of their portfolio that was being tied up in those 10 autoglyphs. Quite the opposite, because otherwise you wouldn't have seen someone holding that just through the bear market and looking left and right and missing other opportunities if that were a majority of your portfolio. So I think if you tie that together with what we discussed about Zuzu, it all the more makes sense if you look at other people trading and try to evaluate what they're doing for your own learning. Because we had one person, you know, selling an autoglyph for, I think, also a Fidenza. Someone else did a Fidenza to buy Pudgies. And then you have this person keeping 10 autoglyphs for 3-4 years to flip them for a 10x, where, you know, there's many things that a 10x over the last 3-4 years. So that per se isn't too impressive. I think it's always like important to keep that perspective in mind if you see someone else trading, where they are, and not just blindly copy them, because that's the easiest way to get burned.
Yeah. Very, very fair points. Interesting thoughts there. I think let's keep it moving because I want to try to touch on both of these final things. But first, we'll do the Web3 roundup, get you up to speed with what else has taken place in the last 24 hours. As always, this comes from the snapshot, which is pinned up top. And we'll get you the rest of the news that's been happening in the past 24 hours. Number one, Mad Lads announces Tensor as the official marketplace of Mad Lads, trading with 1.25x boost for backpack wallets. That's pretty cool. Good for Mad Lads, good for Tensor. Number two, Blast L2 reminds people of their key dates. Bridge for yield and points now. dApps live and withdrawals enabled this week. Blast points will be redeemable in May. So yes, you can start doing things with your ETH on Blast soon, but they're not going to turn into money until May. So just bear that in mind as part of your own calculations and your evaluations as you move forward. Next, ETH restaking narrative strong as Eigenlayer points trade at 0.15 ETH on Whales market. Obviously, we've been speaking about the restaking narrative for quite a period of time. This is one of the strongest, most bullish reasons for ETH at the moment. I think people have been talking about it quite a lot, and Eigenlayer is expected to be to launch at an insane FDV whenever that does come out. At least 20 billion is what I've seen being talked about. Next, SinkerSDAO announces airdrop for penguins, bored apes, and mutants, sappy seals, and wreck guys. Interesting to see which collections are getting these allocations moving forward. It's definitely going to be a trend we continue to see. Always going to keep a note and see who gets those. Getting into some more news, SBF first jail photo appears, provided by Tiffany Fong, legendary. I don't know if you saw that or what you made of it. And then finally, AI artist Botto announces integration with Farcaster to allow voting on art and frames without leaving the app. That's really cool, because one of the things about Botto, which is this AI artist, is that in order for it to know what to output, the holders of the coin have to vote on the type of art that they like in order to guide the AI. And now, I think previously you had to kind of sign in and vote. Now you can just do that one click within Farcaster. So that is pretty cool. Interesting to see how Farcaster is innovating and kind of integrating with crypto and Web3 to increase the friendliness of the crypto product. Those are the rest of the headlines from around the space. Legendary, let's get to which one should we do first? I think let's do the persona journey mint details, because I think that would be of interest to people. Then we'll try to do the most complicated thing in a couple of minutes, but let's do the persona journey mint details. I think you know a little bit about it more than me. If you want to take over, I've got it on the screen if you need to see some of the information, and for the other people watching.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe just one quick sentence as like an additional point of news before we get into the persona journey. Starknet, we spoke about it briefly before the show, has
Oh.
started trading and is currently trading at $2.60, which is more than double of where whale market saw it at $1 to $1.10.
Interesting. Does that mean we are pre-rich, rich, or post-rich?
We are still pre-rich because at least my allocation isn't the highest in Starknet.
Yeah, they screwed people over with the allocation, right? Interesting stuff.
No.
But if you do, so yeah, if you have an Argent wallet, I do need to actually double check. So I didn't even bother checking in the end. So check in there, make sure, see what your Stark allocation is. Legendary, take it away. What's going on with Persona Mint? Why is it one of the most anticipated mints coming up for the next, in this period of time? What do you make of this mechanism where there's like a part whitelist, part public auction price?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Persona Journey has been doing excellent in terms of the marketing around their PFP collection. I think that everyone really enjoys and loves the art. What I personally don't think is that the reason why it's hyped so much is that it's connected to obviously the gaming studio Unagi and to the success of the games that they launched, and
Okay.
obviously games that have created substantial revenue in the past as opposed to others. I personally don't think that a lot of people on the timeline have made that connection and have like realized, okay, this is Persona, this is part of a gaming ecosystem. They have those fantasy sports games. They actually have made revenue. I think that it is more a result of the art looking like really, really good, and B, just basically every influencer, KOL, posting about it up and down on their timeline. And then you have a bunch of people who have made that connection and who know, okay, there's going to be a token. Persona Journey is going to be connected somehow to the Unagi ecosystem token. But I do think that they did a fantastic job in terms of marketing and getting it to that point. In terms of the mint, mint is happening on the 22nd of Feb. So it's happening on Thursday. Collection size 8.8K. There is a whitelist / pre-sale with 2.4K allocated to that at a fixed price of 0.069 ETH. That part of the whitelist isn't oversubscribed to my knowledge. That's no gas war and a guaranteed allocation. And then there is a public sale that starts. If you could scroll down on that a bit so I get the dates right, because it didn't have them in mind any longer. That is starting a bit on the same day, but a bit after the whitelist ends for the remainder of the 5.8K of the allocation. And that doesn't have a fixed price, that has a price discovery mechanism, aka a bidding system. You basically can bid 0.069 ETH, which is the minimum bid, which is the whitelist price, up to 0.29 ETH as the maximum price. And then at the end of the auction period, top bids gain a Persona NFT. Obviously, if there's going to be more than 5.8K people entering the public sale, and all of them or more than 5.8K will bid the max bid, which would lead to a tie, then there will be a raffle among the top bids to define who mints a Persona NFT, which personally I think is exactly what's going to happen. Okay. Just judging by the fact that we see the whitelist spots trading at that 1.3 to 1.4K range, which puts them closer to 0.5, 0.45-ish ETH. I do think that we're going to see exactly that.
I don't know, man. My personal thought on this, I'm not sure about this stuff sometimes. Like, I've got a couple of thoughts. I don't know, kind of disorganized. I'm just speaking off the top of my head. One, and maybe it's true because that I don't have whitelists. I'm kind of bored of whitelists. Like, everything's so curated now, and it's kind of annoying to see whether you are on the whitelist or not. I don't like the idea of 2,400 people getting in at 0.069, and then the majority of people 5823 getting in at 0.29 potentially. I don't know. What's the reason for that? Like, couldn't it just be
It's a different distribution
mechanic?
mechanism.
Sure.
Like if you look at, sorry, I think I was cutting out.
No, we can hear you.
No. Okay. If you look at something like Overworld, they had the mint. I don't even remember 0.15 ETH, I think.
Sure.
And went straight to secondary, went straight to 1.5 ETH. The team did collect a lot of money by minting at 0.5 ETH, but the majority of the value capture happened on the secondary market and was distributed to those who were able to purchase pre-sale spots or mint with whitelist. So they got the majority of the profits from that. And by having that kind of system and having that price band, you just are able to raise more money as the project if the market's interest and demand is as high as you think it is, and you just leave less of that margin to your minters, but you don't take away everything if you still compare it like to the whitelist spots. I think we spoke about that a couple times on the show with artists and them exploring pricing for art and getting to a point where you just basically don't leave any margin for your collectors to flip. And I think that there's like a conflict of interest. On the one hand, obviously, you want to maximize your revenue as a company to a certain extent. On the other hand, you want your buyers, and there's obviously, as always in crypto and with NFT mints, a substantial amount of them who just want to speculate. You want them to have enough of an upside left to create the demand that you need. If you have a bidding system like that it sells out at the maximum. I do understand the frustration, generally speaking, with whitelist sales. I do understand it, especially from the perspective of people who just have a hard time to get access to all of them. Is there a better solution to that? Yes, there certainly is. I think some models are too complex. I think just raffling it out, as it would happen here at the top end, like just raffling it out without a bidding without a bidding system is a good way to go as well. I see some games doing the play to mint thing where you have to deposit an effort to be able to mint. I generally understand, that's coming from someone who has a whitelist for that mint. Just as a full disclosure, that frustration around the whitelist meta that we're experiencing.
Do you know what? Just while you're talking about it, we're going to go to Jack in a second because I think he has some additional knowledge on this particular mint. But although we don't have very long, one of the things I was thinking as you were talking was that I actually think it's fine. I've changed my mind literally live on air after thinking about it more, after hearing some of the stuff that you said, because I think it's fine to have more complex capital raises. In essence, that's what it is. We spoke a little bit about how all NFT sales are basically becoming pre-sales, and all this is like a further breakdown of the pre-sale. It's like, okay, if you buy this NFT, you're going to get some token, and you fit into this broader structure of like pre-seed investors, seed investors, NFT buyers. All right, so now these projects will still have pre-seed investors, they'll still have seed investors. You'll have like pre-NFT buyers, because there's even like a pre-sale selection of 665 supply here. That's going to cost 0.069. Those probably go to your like most prominent people on the timeline who are able to do some pre-sale, in the same way that the pre-seed investors might be playing with bigger capital and are able to get in early. And that's just the equivalent for the NFT round. So it's kind of like breaking the NFT capital raise down into different structures in the same way that all capital raises are broken down, with different benefits depending how early you are in and also who you are. So I've just reflected on that a little bit. That's how I would think about it. Jack, we don't have long. Quick 30 seconds from you on Persona. What did you find out? Why is it so good? Any issues with this minting mechanic?
No, minting mechanic, I think, makes sense. I think when you look at whitelists, it is a way to hopefully bring in people who are going to hold a bit longer term because you can curate them a little bit, or bring KOLs in that are going to obviously directly benefit you. So if there's a bit of an offset on price there, but these people are going to talk about you a lot on the timeline and they have that audience, I think it's a necessary part. I think marketing is a huge part of the space right now, if not one of the most valuable parts. A couple things that haven't been said. So Legendary did speak about the game that Unagi Studios, who are behind Persona, have already released. That did a $4 million round with Binance. So these guys are ex-Ubisoft, like all the co-founders. It's not just like one of them. They're all ex-Ubisoft. They focus on predominantly sort of quick-to-play games on mobile, but they also did build out a lot of IP, so really good sort of crossover there for now being in the Web3 space. Outside of that, I think one thing to mention is that the token is due to come Q1 2024, and they have also announced a new game, which has also been announced to happen within the next month. The new game, unlike the sort of fantasy football spin of the previous game, has been confirmed to be nothing to do with that. So it's more likely to be linked with Persona. But Spike, who is specifically the founder of Persona and also the creative lead at Unagi, he has confirmed that Persona in its own right, they are very focused on building out the IP. They're very focused on you not having to be interested in the gaming ecosystem to still get a lot of joy from the anime and the sort of the 80s 90s theme of that style. So yeah, there's separations there as well. Very bullish on them. They've both been in the space for a long time. One's been a DGOD holder since mint, one's a Bored Ape Yacht Club holder. So yeah, just really interesting.
Very cool. I mean, that has been one of the things I've noticed, which is that people are like minting stuff and then they're like, yeah, and then you're going to have the token in like 2 weeks. And that obviously manages to give people a hell of a lot more impetus than they would otherwise, thinking that the TG is coming right around the corner. And just a word of warning to people is that, yes, people might say that, but take it with a pinch of salt. Sometimes, maybe some people will deliver with it exactly on time. But I know from some investments I've done recently, people do miss deadlines and they might not come as quickly as you expect. Sometimes if things sound too good to be true, sometimes they are. That's just a reflection. Maybe they'll do it exactly on time and on schedule, but there have been a few examples recently where that hasn't been the case. So just be aware of that. Legendary, one final conclusion from you on this. What are your concluding thoughts?
Yeah, very much agree with Jack. I had the pleasure of interviewing both Spike and Remy last week on my spaces with ZTX. The only point where I would differ, and this is not something specific to Persona, but generally my feedback from speaking to founders, and it was not the Persona founders who said that, it was someone else, was that point on, you curate the whitelist because you want to have like a strong set of holders. And that one founder, pretty prominent project, was like, I don't care about that strong set of holders. What I prioritize over that is trading frequency. I want to see people trading that. I want them to take profits and sell it higher and higher and higher, because that volume, that trading frequency, that gives me attention more than KOLs could do. And if my PFP, NFT, whatever it is, does a 5x, 6x, and 2K in volume in a couple of days, that just is more helpful on the timeline than having 70% unique holders who just love it and don't sell it. It's just not helpful for the attention game that we're in.
Interesting. Maybe we'll have NFT market makers moving forward with pre-existing commitments to buy certain numbers at certain prices as well. I think the market will become more sophisticated, just like it's developed.
We kind of have that already. Isn't that what Grail and Dingaling are doing? They get a big chunk of pre-sale spots if you like a project, and then they also buy and sweep the secondary a bit later. It's essentially that, but less formalized.
I do know that some people, I think some people do have some agreements to perform some type of secondary activity, but I don't know the specifics. So, but I think, yeah.
No, even if it's not, I'm not saying that there's a formal agreement, but even if in absence of a formal agreement, this is what in reality is like happening on the market.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. Interesting to analyze. Interesting to keep an eye on, because I do think that the market is developing in that way, and maybe we'll have kind of more formal agreements moving forward with kind of NFT market makers. Interesting stuff, guys. We've run out of time today. We hopefully touched on a lot of interesting topics, kind of ranging from security, market stuff with the autoglyphs, and then this Persona Mint, which is probably the most important one going on this week. We didn't get a chance to speak on Athena. There is more information in the snapshot pinned up top, as always, if you want to dive into it a little bit more. And we'll probably try to cover it again at some point in time. But we have come towards the end of the show. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Legendary, as always, for co-hosting with me. Thank you to our speakers, Sammy, Jack, Oxy, and Funky, and anyone else who joined during the show. Thank you guys for tuning in. We hope you have a wonderful day. We will be back with you tomorrow. Have a great day. Bye-bye.